almost don't even know where to start with this. If you are watching this, I'm going to just assume that you're in one of three groups. The first being, you have read the first 4 and want to know if the 5th one is worth your time. And it is a time investment. This took me a month to read. Those who read it in like 3 days to a week, I don't even know how. And if you're in that first group, welcome. This review is for you. The second group are those who are waiting to see if this is worth their time before starting the Stormlight Archive from the beginning. And if you have had the patience to wait 15 years, and you're one of those people who wants a finished series before starting, you're gonna have longer to wait before you're satisfied. Or you're the third group and you have already read this and just want to see what other people think of it. In which case, also welcome, but I am going to make a video with all the spoilers separate from this one, so you can also always come back for that one and we can talk spoilers. My notes are a little messy, so I'll be going in no particular order, but starting with plot. And so, big main spoiler for the end of Rhythm of War, this one starts almost immediately after Rhythm of War ends, where Dalinar and Odium have made their deal. A showdown on the 10th day, Contest of Champions. And so this book is divided into 10 parts, and each one of the parts is a day leading up to Challenge Day. And every one of those days is split up by an interlude in the true style of the rest of the books in the series. But these interludes are not very long. Every interlude is pretty short, like a page of a character, and then a page or less of Odium, and then to the next day. At the beginning, it is very quickly revealed that there were not necessarily loopholes in the contract, but there is room for a lot of fighting because of how they worded the contract. Whoever's holding on to a particular land is going to get it. So it just opened the door for a lot of battles to happen, and we follow a few of the different characters through those battles for the different portions of land that Odium wants to control. And then they're just like scrambling, trying to figure out how to defeat a god by the end. Overall, the plot is pretty simple and straightforward, and it only takes place over 10 days. So I think the natural next thing to talk about is the pacing. This is a really long book to take place over 10 days, but at no point did I feel like it was dragging or that it was going too slow. There's a lot of characters to follow, and each character was given time in this conclusion to Arc 1 to give them time to still have those moments of struggle and what am I going to do, and still having some relationship building. And there were so many characters introduced through the first 4, and almost every, if not every, main point of view character from the first 4 gets point of view chapters here. As far as the pacing of the storytelling, it felt very unrushed, which I think is part of why it's so long. I think it could easily have a rushed feeling trying to cover 10 days. But then, something that I felt like kind of messed up the pacing and made it take longer than it needed to was that this book, in addition to the flashbacks of a character, which has been normal through the first 4, each one has their own character that gets their flashbacks and their backstory, they do this weird thing where they spend a lot of time, some of the characters spend a lot of time in the spiritual realm, which is really like wibbly-wobbly time-wise. They can spend as long there as they need to and take up no time in the physical world, or vice versa. Think they're there for an hour and it takes all 10 days until the contest, which is a real danger. And during time in the spiritual realm, Dalinar is one of the main characters that goes there, we get revealed so much of the history. We get a lot of the backstory of the world of Roshar, how the gods got there. I felt like too much time was spent on that. Too much time in the spiritual realm, having all the things that have been mysterious up to this point just slowly revealed to us. I felt like that was a weird choice. Like, choosing to have one book this long take place over 10 days, kind of a weird choice, but it makes sense with the deal that was made at the end of Rhythm of War. But choosing to take some of that time to go so far back in time and like have it play out as a history, I wasn't bored by it. I enjoyed seeing all that stuff getting revealed as we went. I just felt like it was a weird choice. It was weird. One of the other things I had to say about this book is that it does not feel like the other ones in the series. Like the evolution of the story and the storytelling from the Way of Kings to here changes a lot. I was already feeling like that in Rhythm of War, and then we get to this one and it just didn't really give me the feel of a Stormlight Archive book. By the time I got to here, I was just like, I was invested in the characters. I wanted to see what happened to those characters, how they grew, how their stories resolved, how we got from point A, beginning of the Way of Kings, to whatever letter in the alphabet this would count as. So there's just a lot. We're given a lot about the world, about the characters. It's like everything you might want to know, we get to know now here. As far as like not feeling like the Way of Kings, which is my favorite of the 5, or just not feeling like a Stormlight Archive book, it did have a lot of characters like reminiscing about their time from the first one. There were a lot of callbacks, a lot of characters thinking about stuff from that first book and from the stuff that they did during that time, but it felt a little bit artificial, like trying too hard to give us the feelings from the first book when this is not the first book anymore. Okay, going back to my notes. This book starts with Gavilar. Finally, every one of these starts on the same night, the night of the betrayal, when the war started, and you get a different character's point of view of that night, and this one you finally get Gavilar's point of view. And by the end of that prologue, is it even called a prologue? Maybe it's a prelude. Prologue. By the end of that prologue, you may feel differently about Gavilar, but I don't think you'll be surprised by the way you feel. And though I was not surprised by Gavilar, there were a couple things thrown into that prologue where I was like, wait a minute, what? And so I was surprised by other things that I didn't know or hadn't considered. And so from the very first few pages, just starting the prologue, it changed the way I was thinking about the whole story from the beginning. And it made me glad that I didn't reread the first 4 in preparation for this because of how much you learn here. Now I feel like I need to go back and read the first 4 knowing what I know now. So it starts with Gavilar, and then the main character that we get, the backstory and the flashbacks that I knew he would be one of these, Szeth. I had not been looking forward to that. Szeth was not one of my favorite characters. He's not one that I really cared about. And so knowing that he was going to get point of view chapters and go into his backstory, I thought it would be boring. I thought I would not care. And I actually really enjoyed those chapters. Definitely got pulled in by him a lot. And I found myself like sympathizing with him a lot. I felt like I really related to him more than I expected to. There was a little confusion for me personally. It's probably not a story problem, it's probably a me problem, in that the physical place on Roshar that Szeth was modern day was the same as it was in his flashbacks. And so sometimes a chapter would start and I'd be like, wait, are we in the past or are we right now? I don't know that I want to say in this review what other characters I was really happy about or disappointed by. I don't know if that would be too spoilery for some people. I will say I have a couple of favorite characters, and one of them I was just super happy with the whole time. So thankful for the way that Sanderson handled his character growth, because even in 10 days there was a lot of character growth for this person. And then another one of my favorite characters, I was really disappointed by the way that his characterization was handled. Those are things that I will go more into in the spoiler video. So when you've read it and you have feelings about characters, that'll be the one to watch. I think this is probably a good time to go into things like the representation. There is a lot of representation. I almost felt like too much. I don't think I can view it as a negative thing to include all the representation of so many different things, disabilities, disorders, gender and sexual orientation, but at some point it felt like there was more focus on who is getting to be represented than on the story. And it felt like Sanderson was walking a fine line of, well, if I've represented this and this and this, I can't leave this out, and then I can't leave this out, versus only add the representation that also adds to the story. You can't represent every person in one story, nor should any author feel like they have to or feel pressured to. And Sanderson had already done such a good job of introducing different things to give representation to in the previous books. I don't know that he needed to add more. He could have just dived deeper into the ones that were already there, which he also did. In some places, I was feeling like there's terminology in writing called show, don't tell. And there were some things that got very telly, like really over-explaining what some of the people he was representing went through on a daily basis, what was kind of going through their minds, how they feel, how they react. And at first I was feeling a little negative about that, like, I don't need this explained so much, I get it. And then I realized I was feeling that way about the characters that represented things that I am like. Some of the characters that struggle with some of the things that I do, I was like, I get it. I know. I already know they feel that way and go through that. But then I realized that's part of the point, so that people can see themselves in a book, to know they're not alone, to know that other people deal with the same things they do, but also for the people who don't go through those things. There were characters represented that I do not go through what they do. Those weren't the ones I was frustrated by because I don't know how they feel. And so through these characters, I can gain more understanding of them, and also other people who don't go through what I do can sympathize more with those characters and what they're going through. So when you go through something every day, you don't need it explained to you how it feels, but it helps to know that other people also understand. So a lot of that in here. For some readers, it might feel like too much. For others, it will be like, finally, someone gets me and I see myself in a book. And then to piggyback from there, this one was very inspirational. And I say that neither as a negative or positive, just that that's how it is. It's like an inspirational fantasy. So all the people who have been struggling with things so much, not all the people, a lot of the people, the characters who have been struggling with things and going through so much through the first 4 books and novellas, not leaving those out, they get to this one and they're having like breakthroughs, they're having some healing, they're having life lessons learned that are being shared with the audience, us reading. So I think that some people are going to find that cheesy, and other people are going to find this to be a book that speaks to them deeply and be like the best book they read in their life. And I think that's just going to depend on the point of view of the person reading it. Okay, and then to piggyback from there, this only takes place over 10 days. And there is a lot of deep emotional issues with some of the characters that they kind of work through over an incredibly short period of time, or another character expects them to work through over an incredibly short period of time. To me, resolving trauma in less than 10 days was one of the most unrealistic parts of this book. And I understand that it only takes place during 10 days, and if as an author you want that resolution to happen, you have to make it work. So sometimes it felt a little magical that it was happening. That's okay, the book has magic. It's fine. I am going to just accept that it's a story and not be mad about it. So, looking back at my notes, should probably look at them more often. I wrote that some of the things felt too easy. Working through trauma in a short amount of time was one of those things that just felt too easy. But also, the characters that go to the spiritual realm, I also felt like that was one of the things where things just happened too easily. The spiritual realm is supposed to be so dangerous and so confusing, even wit is scared to go there. And then once the characters who go to the spiritual realm get there, it didn't seem as dangerous or confusing as it should have. That was a little disappointing. I thought they should have struggled more there, but that wasn't the point of the spiritual realm. The point was seeing everything that they were supposed to see there. It's hard to say enough without spoiling, so I'll stop there. It does feel like it has too modern of language, and I saw a post, maybe on Reddit, about like Sanderson's response to the modern language used in here. I did not read it or watch it. I just saw that it was a thing and I thought, oh yeah, I did think the language was very modern sounding. I didn't want my opinion to be influenced before I made my own review, so I'm not sure what Sanderson's reasoning was for having the language sound more modern. It wasn't enough to like pull me out of the story, it was enough for me to notice, and I felt like more editing time could have been spent turning the modern sounding language into more like period appropriate. I mean, it's a different world, what is the time period? It didn't feel like it quite matched the tone of the first ones in the series. Also, this book is very heavy. I weighed it and it's over 3 pounds and so heavy that as I was reading, it was starting to fall apart. If you can see where it's like unattaching itself. So if I can re-glue that somehow, I will. Or if I reread, I might try to get it on Kindle or something. But it also begs the question, does it deserve to be this big? Should Wind and Truth have been shorter? I'm going to say that it included everything that it needed to. And the extra stuff that it was there, where sometimes I was like, did this really need this? Like all the rules to the card game. I know, and if you're watching this, you probably know, that Sanderson is a huge Magic the Gathering fan and player. So when I was reading the rules to the game in the book, I was like, is this just him having fun? Is this really necessary? But yeah, the card game in the book is used for the plot. You just don't know yet when you start reading it and you're like, do I need to know this? But also through that, there's some good relationship building between a couple of characters that I really enjoyed and was something that I loved about the story. And then other things, just like extra details and stuff, it fleshes it out. Although it's huge and the pacing felt weird at times and it wasn't like the other ones, at no point did I feel bored or like it was dragging on. Whether that means it actually deserved to be this big, I don't know. But I think if a fan of the books is enjoying what they're reading, then yeah, it deserved to be 3 pounds. Speaking of weight, I am going to just rest my arms a little. So as far as its place in the series, how it fits in, how it is as a continuation / conclusion, I felt like by this book, by number 5, it has grown far beyond the like small scale character stories to more of the large scale epic proportions that you could tell it was probably leading towards. And that's probably one of the things that disappointed me a little more and why I preferred a couple of the characters' point of views more than others. A couple of the characters were more focused in on and on what they are really going through right now. For a lot of the other parts of the book, it was more like, here is the huge scale we are on now. This is a battle of gods. It's not about those puny little humans in parchment anymore. It has grown beyond them. It's more like by this one, we're getting the big picture arc of the story. It's very apparent that from the beginning of the series, Sanderson knew where he was going. He knew the start point and the end point, and this weird, awkward midpoint this one leads us to. He knew where it was going, and he got us there. That is something about Sanderson that a lot of fans appreciate. He builds trust with us. We know that he's not just guessing, or like he's lost his way and then weirdly has to find it. He knows what he is doing with his story. But to me, it felt like it got so into the large scale things and like we as the readers needed to understand all the large scale stuff. It lost some of the magic of those first ones where we're getting to know the characters. Like by this one, we know the characters. We know our favorites, we know what they're going through and what they're headed towards, or what we hope they're headed towards. And with the more like epic, large scale stuff going on, this one makes a lot more cross-Cosmere connections. So Sanderson's wish, his hope, his intention was that each one of his series could be read in isolation. If you want to read the Mistborn trilogy, all you have to read is the Mistborn trilogy. If you want to read the Stormlight Archive, all you have to read is the Stormlight Archive. But the more cross-Cosmere connections that a book makes The more characters that you get between the books, the more like inter-god fighting, because you know each of those shards from the different worlds has their own intention. It gets harder to just read the series you like, and it starts to become more necessary to read all of the other stuff, and that can seem a little overwhelming. Like if the Stormlight Archive sounds super interesting and you just want to read this, it gets harder to read just these and still understand what's going on. I made one of those short videos recently about the required reading for this book. I still feel like it should just be the first 4 are the only required ones. But there starts to be so much more that you need to know to really fully enjoy everything. I think by the time we get around to Arc 2, and there'll be enough time for this, you'll have to have read more of the other things to fully appreciate it. Maybe that's the real reason he's waiting so long, giving us time to read all the other stuff. There are good conclusions here. There are things that started in the Way of Kings with certain characters and plot lines that end, or at least have a good satisfying end point, and you feel like now, time for Arc 2. But it did not feel like the end. The separation between Arc 1 and Arc 2 is not going to be as clean cut as like Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2. Separate stories, separate eras of time, different characters. This one is not going to be like that. And after finishing this one, it didn't feel like the end. It didn't feel like, finally, the resolution. It felt like, now I have to wait years to find out what happens next. There is one character arc in this book that felt very satisfying. No. And it's not the one that I felt like I was really happy with. It's one that you can see everything leading up to how it ends. And you're like, yeah, that's what should have happened this whole time. There's another character that I was very upset by how he was just used and abused for the plot, both by Sanderson and by Odium, and I was really mad about that. And I'm hoping that that becomes a character that we see more of in the second arc. It would make sense, and it had better be on Sanderson's plan to include the character that I'm really mad about. Speaking of not a real conclusion and needing to move on to the next thing, if you have read this or if you watch this review and then go read it, come back for the spoiler video. Then you'll know which characters I'm mad about and which ones I'm happy about. I'm sure there's things I left out. Was it good? Yes. Was it perfect? Or even what I wanted? I don't even know that it matters. And now I'm impatiently waiting the next one. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys a lot. A link to my Patreon and Instagram will be in the description. I just talked for a long time about this Stormlight Archive book and didn't even mention Bridge 4. I guess that says a lot about what you see from Bridge 4 here. And then come back for the spoiler video for my thoughts on that. Happy reading. Bye.